Good morning, Denison ISD students. This is Miss Doxel from Mays Elementary, and we are all hoping you are doing well at home. We are missing you and hoping everything is going good. Well, today we're going to look at a new story. If you have your book with you, you will need your reading book, the My Book number 2, and you need to turn to page 284. We are going to look at the story, How Did That Get in My Lunchbox? The Story of Food. But before we get started, we're going to look at some information about the story. We're going to look at some vocabulary, the genre of the story, and kind of do a little predicting of what we think the story might be about. So on page 284, you will see that the genre of this story is informational. And you will see right here at the top, you will see that an informational story is true and it gives facts about a certain topic. So think about the story. How did that get in my lunchbox? The story of food. And stop and think about the topic, what you think this story may be about based on the title. If you need a pause at any time to stop and talk about the story with your parent or guardian, you can do that as well. So we're thinking about, how did that get in my lunchbox? The story of food. So to me, I'm thinking to myself, I think this story is going to be about maybe the lunches that I eat, some foods that we see, maybe foods that are grown in our area, foods that can grow outside. So let's also now look at the bottom of page 284. And you will see critical vocabulary. It's in blue down here at the bottom of page 284, and they are highlighted in yellow, and it says critical vocabulary. We're going to go over some of these words that you will see in this story. You may have went over these words a little bit yesterday, but we're going to look at them one more time. And our first word, I wrote it out for you, is stalk. And you probably have heard of the word stalk when you have done science lessons with plants. So a stalk is the main stem of a plant. So if you go outside and maybe you have a garden and you see a stem growing from the ground, that's the stalk. Dairy. I know many of you have heard the word dairy because you've heard your parents talking maybe about milk, cheese, yogurts. Dairy is a place where milk is prepared for drinking or is made into other products such as butter, cream, and cheese. Curds. That may be a new word. You may have heard it, you may not have. But that is the lumps that form in milk when it turns sour. So maybe after that expiration date of your milk goes, it turns sour and there's big clumps in it. Those are the curds. Tingly. When something tingles, it stings a little or feels prickly. So maybe you've been stung by a bee, maybe you have been bitten by a spider and it tingles a little bit, it stings a little bit. That is tingly. Scarlet. Scarlet, it is a bright red color. So it's another name for red. It's a scarlet. It's a bright red. Grove is a group of trees that are close to one another. Maybe you've been in the forest, maybe you've been hiking through the woods, and there's a group of trees that you have seen. So those are some vocabulary words that you may see throughout the story. Now we're going to look at some questions and talk about some questions that we might have before we do our reading. So I want you to think about the author of this story and look and think about why the author maybe wrote this story. What are some reasons that they came up with a story about how did that get in my lunchbox? So turn and talk to maybe someone that is beside you and think about why the author might have written this story. Okay, so I'm thinking to myself about this. I'm thinking that maybe they wrote this story to help you to understand better some things that are in your lunchbox or some things that maybe you even eat for dinner. How did those foods get there? Why do we eat these type of foods? Maybe are they healthy foods? Are they good for you? Are they things that you enjoy eating? So there is making a prediction. Why do we think that the author put this story together for us? Okay, also on page 284, you will see at the bottom right here where it's in green, and it says set a purpose. I want you to think about the title and the genre of this story. How did that get in my lunchbox, the story of food? And remember, this is an informational story. It gives facts about and examples about a certain topic. And it says, think about the title and the genre of this text. Why do you think you are going to learn what do you think you are going to learn from this text? Write your ideas below. So think about what you might learn from the story that we are about to read. And in that box on page 284, write some ideas down of what and why you think we're going to learn in our story. Okay, I am going to read the story along with you. So as I read the story, I want you to follow along in your book. We're going to start on page 285. How did that get in my lunchbox? Okay, turn the page to 286. One of the best parts of the day is when you lift the lid of your lunchbox to see what's inside. Your parents have packed it with love. With lots of tasty things to eat. They probably got all the food from a grocery store, but food doesn't grow in stores. Page 287. So where did it come from before it was in the store? Just how did all this food get in your lunchbox? So you can see all of the students at lunchtime looking at their lunchboxes, seeing what their parents put inside of it, seeing what they're going to have for lunch that day. Now, on page 286, I'm going to reread paragraph 1 because I want you to think about what the most important part of paragraph 1 is. What was it all about? What did we look at? One of the best parts of the day is when you lift the lid of your lunchbox to see what's inside. Your parents have packed it with lots of tasty things to eat. They probably got all the food from a grocery store, but food doesn't grow in stores. So I want you to stop and pause, and I want you to think about what was the most important idea in that paragraph. Okay, I'm thinking that the food in your lunchbox comes from stores, but the food doesn't grow in stores. So it makes me think to myself, well, where did that food come from? If it doesn't grow in stores, but it's there, how did it get there? Where did they grow the food? And that's what we're going to look at as we continue reading. So turn to page 288 and 289. On page 288, I want you to look at the top where the heading where it says, how did the bread in your sandwich get in your lunchbox? So that is what this part of the story is going to be about. That is your heading. It gives you an idea of what information we're about to look at. So, a farmer planted seeds in spring, and by summer they'd grown into tall, waving wheat with fat, ripe grains at the tip of every stalk. The farmer cut the wheat with a giant combine harvester and sent it to a flour mill. Page 289. The miller ground the grains into flour, and trucks took the flour to a bakery. The baker mixed the flour with water, sugar, and yeast, kneaded it into a soft, squishy dough, and baked it in a very hot oven. Out came fresh loaves of bread ready to send to the store. Take a bite of the bread in your mouth, and take a bite of the bread in your sandwich. Crusty on the outside and soft on the inside. Okay, so we can see in this part on page 288 and 289, he's telling us how that bread gets into the store, how they harvest it, the tools that they use, how they get the grains and the yeast, and the baker mixes them together, and then they send that to the stores. So that right there gives you an idea and helps you to understand how that bread that you get and eat on your sandwich gets here. So you can think and ask yourself, how did your sandwich bread get into your lunchbox? And it shows you right there how the grain, how the yeast and the sugar mixes together and gets that bread to your lunchbox. Okay, page 290 and 291. On page 290, look at the heading. How did the cheese in your sandwich get in your lunchbox? So we're going to look at how the cheese that may be on your sandwich gets to you. Your cheese was once milk that came from a cow. A farmer milked the cows, and a tanker from the dairy came to collect the milk. So looking on page 290 and 291, on page 290 and 291, there's going to be steps that we're going to look at that they have numbered for us that tell us from step 1 to step 6 how that cheese gets there. So look at number 1. In the dairy, cheese makers warmed up the milk. Step 2, and added bacteria to make it turn sour and thick. Step 3, then they added a substance that animals use to digest milk called rennet. Step 4, and it changed again into fats called curds floating and weighing. Step 5, they drained off the whey, chopped up the rubbery curds, added some salt, and pressed them into blocks. Step 6, they stored the blocks for months until the cheese was ripe. Bite into your cheese. It's creamy and smooth, but tasty too, and tingly on your tongue. So right there gives you an idea of how the cheese is processed, how they start, how they make it, how they get it into your lunchbox on that sandwich. And then you can imagine yourself biting into that cheese, how it's creamy, how it's smooth, how it tastes, but also gives you that tingling feeling on your tongue. Okay, so today we have started and looked at an informational text called How Did That Get Into My Lunchbox? The Story of Food. We are only going to read part of the story today. As we have gone through today, we've looked at some of those text and graphic features, some of those headings. We've looked at the title of the story. We've looked at some of those steps to show us how the bread has gotten to our lunchbox, how the cheese has gotten to our lunchbox. And tomorrow we're going to finish the story looking at some more text and graphic features, maybe looking at some central idea that we'll discuss and look at tomorrow and Friday as well. Well, guys, I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're enjoying your lessons. And I just want you to know that we're missing you terribly. And I hope everything is going well. And we'll see you again tomorrow. Have a great Tuesday, guys. Bye.